Hello and welcome to the IOSH Trailblazer Talks, a new series recorded at the 2024 Health and Safety event in Birmingham. In this episode, Andrew Mawson and Tess Buckley consider the risks and opportunities that AI presents.
We're here on day 2 of the Health and Safety event in Birmingham, and I'm joined in the IOSH podcast booth by Tess Buckley, Digital Ethics and AI Safety at Tech UK, and Andrew Mawson, Head of Health and Safety at EV Cargo. Welcome to you both. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
Good. Yeah, really good to have you here. So first of all, for our listeners and obviously our viewers, please tell us a bit about yourselves. Tess.
Yeah, happy to. So originally from Canada, that's where the accent's from. I came to Britain to do a master's in philosophy and artificial intelligence. So very much focused on ableism in biotechnologies during my time there, and AI ethics and how to operationalize governance frameworks, risk management, all these kinds of things. From there, I transitioned to really heavy work with a data set on corporate digital responsibility that was being used by investors that wanted to understand their portfolio risks, which is great, but just kind of pivoted into specialized model development. So I think what we see in these larger models is they're lovely, but they're trained, on the entire internet. But this model was trained specifically on sustainability reporting. So it was with a company called Ethics Grade, and it was used specifically by chief sustainability officers to kind of support them on disclosure requests and all of this. And then I came to my current role, which I'm really loving. It's at Tech UK, so we're the trade association for the technology sector in the UK. 1,000 companies in membership, 2/3 SMEs, but we also have the larger ones on board. And I'm program managing digital ethics and AI safety. So portfolio means, the acute risk side with the responsible technology adoption unit, or the existential risk side with AI safety. And we're really prioritizing operationalizing AI ethics this year. We do a great job on talking on these things, but hitting the ground running is really important for our membership.
Yeah, I bet you're busy at the moment as well.
Yeah, lots of exciting things going on.
And how about you, Andrew?
So background is health and safety for probably 30 years. But both in logistics and in the oil and gas field, so high hazard industries, both of them. Always been fascinated by technology and how we can use it to help our colleagues to do the job safer. That's my take on it, and AI is going to work for us in that respect. My involvement is from a change management perspective, because I also have compliance as part of my role, so making sure that we don't just introduce things because they look or sound good, make sure they're thought through, and make sure that when we introduce it, like we said on stage, everybody owns it and it's not something that gets done to people.
You mentioned being on stage. We're right next to the IOSH Keynote Theatre here at the event today, and you've both just come off stage after delivering a presentation on AI worker management. So I'm sure you're both very well warmed up, ready for our chat, which is brilliant. So let's dig right in. Tess, let's start with you. Can you explain a little bit more for our listeners about algorithmic management? What is it and what does it mean for occupational safety and health?
Yeah, happy to. I guess the way that I would explain it and bring it to the conversation, and feel free to jump in here, Andrew. I would say that algorithmic management looks a lot like using algorithms and other data analytics to oversee workers' time, workers' assessment, workers' evaluation. And I would say the benefits in OSH can look like, safety monitoring, allocation of resources, these efficiency gains that we're starting to see, and then the kind of underbelly or the downsides, if we don't take appropriate measures, can look like bias or discrimination, kind of bundling employers and not looking at the diverse groups within that and how the technology might impact them specifically. And then I would also say lack of transparency. So a big thing that came up in our conversation is like, these technologies are great and they're being used for really intentional and lovely purposes by employers, but employers still have fear.
Yeah.
The purposes are unknown and the intentions are unclear. And so bringing in communications and acknowledging that, pop culture's done a great job of making us really scared of these technologies. When we hear AI, we might picture the Terminator or something like this, which it's far from. So we talked a lot about, this lack of communication and the importance of that for OSH as well.
And trust, I think, as well with the workers, isn't it?
Yeah, I think trust sometimes precedes truth in a lot of ways. And often, I think because we're seeing so much more synthetic content and disinformation in our ecosystem, in our information environment, we do need to kind of think through what does it mean to walk an individual through the process of employing and deploying these systems. And I think a lot of that looks like pre-deployment. And while you're doing procurement, asking, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And is AI the appropriate thing to use for the problem solving? And then again, working with your communication teams to maybe actually talk with your technical teams and come up with a solution together. It's a really complex topic, right? So just breaking it down and normalizing it.
And I think that's so important as well, is like Tess said, there's no point in just saying, "Ooh, AI, isn't it marvelous? Shall we get it?" You really need to understand, one, why you want it, what are the benefits going to be, why make the change, and as we've both already said, the communication is enormous, because the first thought of most humans is the AI going to replace me?
Yeah.
And very often it's not about that. It's just about, how can we make it efficient? How can we keep our colleagues safe? How does the AI help do that? And if you follow that path, then you're less likely to get the resistance of, "Oh, you're just bringing it in to stop me doing my job and you won't want me." Not about that. And I think the Terminator thing is massively important. We've been off stage 15 minutes. I've already had 4 people stop me and say, "Is Terminator on its way?" So,
yeah, I think it's like, I would also jump in and just point to skills as so important, right? Like, we were on a panel with Tim, and he's been working with his employees directly to kind of upskill them. And in this kind of understanding, it's also acknowledging that these are new technologies, and it's not fair for us to necessarily just throw them at our employees and expect that adoption straight away if we're not willing to kind of create schemes for them to be trained on them so that they're applying them in appropriate use cases, or, making sure it's not in an appropriate use case. And I think, like you mentioned, you come from a background in compliance. Another question on the panel was like, who is responsible? Who is liable? And I think looking at like legal teams, ethics teams, but also compliance teams, and the skills that already exist within those employees could be of use as well.
it's one of those things where I think I said up there as well, is that 10 years ago, who'd heard of a sustainability lead or a head of sustainability? AI is coming, and as a business, you need almost like a focal point for your AI, so you understand what you're doing with it. And, joking apart, it's all too easy for the board to go, "Ooh, health and safety, they must know about that, so we'll let them do it." Reality is, it's a very skilled area. We have, some businesses are fortunate to have perhaps a digitalization team or a head of digitalization. Maybe it sits with them, but you need a focal point that, in the same way as you've got a head of operations or whatever it might be, that can actually lead and make sure that your implementation of AI, your training, your explanation of it is right.
And like you were saying earlier, the information versus disinformation, and seeing it more as an enabler rather than a disabler as well, and understanding why you need it in the first place. It's that foundation, isn't it, that's so important. So, Andrew, what effect do you feel, if we look at workplace culture, what effect can AI have on that?
I think a positive effect, really do. I mean, the ideas that we have for how we'll use it, partly to improve our colleagues' working day in terms of making sure they're efficient and so on. But you can't move past the fact that you need to tell AI that the individual needs to take a break. I said to one of the ladies that stopped me outside the speaking area, was AI doesn't, as far as it's concerned, if it says you're going to move 400 pieces of equipment in a day, then that's what it expects to do. It takes no account for stopping for breaks, stopping for issues, whatever it might be. It just
unless
assumes.
you implement that into the algorithm.
How do you make sure that's built in, so that one of the things we're looking at is having things like brake buttons. So you tell the AI that you're stopping. You don't have to tell it why, obviously, but you tell it that you're stopping, and get that built in. When you're designing the system, make sure that it understands that there are brakes for natural purposes, but also if you hit it, that it's a brake for a breakdown where some equipment has failed, whatever it might be, then that's also fine. Because the AI, as it starts, when you look at it initially, it just thinks the truck runs all day.
Yeah. I think that's a great example of ethics by design, where we're actually taking a proactive approach, considering the ways these technologies could be, used to cause harm in prior to deployment. It's lovely to hear that that's what you've been up to.
It's always been a concern of mine, is that I don't want AI to rule what we do. I want it to help and make it better.
To enable, And it's also, when we were talking about earlier about people worrying that it's going to replace them, it's actually doing the example that you just gave, Andrew. It's giving them that empowerment, isn't it? It's your sort of the ruler of AI. It will do as you tell it to do in order to help you do your job more efficiently, more productively, and more safely, which is so important. So both of you, what are the main opportunities given by AI in the workplace?
I would say something we kind of kept on talking on the panel, because the big thing is these efficiency gains.
Yeah.
So as much as we speak on it in these high levels, we're really seeing it in the way that we manage scheduling and, again, allocating resources, because systems are able to see and reflect on larger bodies of data than us as humans are able to. So, for instance, in a different area in the medical system right now, we're seeing the NHS use AI to actually decrease wait times for patients. So I think that is an incredible use of it. I think I would also say, innovation is so big in the UK, and of course there's going to be implications for culture as we try and integrate these technologies, but there's also a lot of lovely use cases and new ways of doing business and creating business models that we're seeing with these applications of AI.
I think for us, even now, we're seeing huge benefits in terms of planning what vehicles do, planning what equipment does, planning our warehouse space and things like that. You've still got to manage it, like we've said, but the benefits are very clear in terms of where we can be efficient with itinerary planning, delivery planning, where we can. Classic example off the top of my head is that in the old days when we used to do everything on paper, which is going back a while, you literally could have a truck going one way, passed by a truck going the other way, but both going to the destinations that the loads, so they cross over. Now, AI and us as individuals have got much better. Very rarely happens because the AI can look and it can go, oh, Tess is sending a truck to Manchester and I've got a load in Manchester to bring back to London where Tess lives. There we go.
Yeah.
Much more efficient, less fuel burn, much more sustainable.
Yeah. Excellent. Good all round. And I guess with those sort of positives, it's easier to get board buy-in as well for the AI in the first place, isn't it?
And I think we're going to see in the future of work, we're going to see more and more of this kind of human AI collaboration, or these instances where we're using these technologies early on and iteratively engaging with them to support our development, whether that's in the ideating phase, because we have now this chatbot that we can engage with and brainstorm with, or whether it's actually, again, we kind of come back to this resource management and spotting areas of efficiency where we just wouldn't be able to without these emerging technologies.
This all sounds really, really exciting, and sorry to bring the mood down slightly, but there's got to be risks and pitfalls. Andrew, what have you seen?
So you get to, I think we've mentioned this before, but I think we do. So certainly our younger colleagues will rely ultimately on everything that the vehicle is doing, and that's whether it's a truck, a car, a forklift, whatever it might be, that they're all equipped with excellent telematics. Most of us have got systems in our cars, little beepers that tell us when we're getting too close, and systems that will actually alter the speed of the vehicle whilst you're in it, which are amazing. Our more mature colleagues are still wary of that, and actually that's quite good. because they don't trust it yet. Whereas our younger colleagues, it's a thing they have, it's a thing they use, they don't have to think about it, and they're sure it's going to work. What if it doesn't?
Yeah.
And, I've been in my own car where you're traveling on a main road, the speed limit might be 70 miles an hour. There could be a set of roadworks just off the main road where it's 50, and the car will suddenly slow down, and you think, oh, but it's because its radar and everything else has picked up the 50 and not the... And ultimately, as we always say when we talk to our colleagues that drive the vehicles, we still need you, the pilot. You still need to look out there and make sure everything's right and make sure the vehicle is safe to be on the road. So that interaction between AI and people is still so important.
Yeah. And Tess, what have you seen in terms of risks and pitfalls?
I think I would agree with Andrew on the kind of human AI interaction and this need to steer clear of over-reliance or over-dependence. And perhaps that looks a lot like actually agreeing at a board level on process of disclosing and appropriate use cases and inappropriate use cases. And then further, a big kind of wider fear for me is this erosion of trust that we're seeing again in this disinformation and misinformation and lack of transparency or explainability in the outputs of algorithmic management. So let's say that you are using a tool that suggests an individual is performing below what is expected of them, and you have to sit down and have that conversations. Hey, we've got this data, we're seeing this pattern of work. Being able to sit with yourself and allow the employee to kind of either feedback and create a feedback mechanism for them to engage with that outcome properly, or that you can sit and before making that decision, there's that human element. It's not just going straight to the employee before engaging. And I think that is a fear or kind of underbelly.
And I think that human element's so important because traditionally in like a working environment, the supervisor would come and say, Tess, is there anything wrong? You look like you're not yourself, or the AI will pick that up on the basis of you're not doing X number of activities per or whatever that measure is. You still need the human element. Are you all right? And we must never lose that because we are not machines.
Absolutely.
And take it on board that you could feel unwell, you could not be sure what to do with that particular task, you might feel a bit lost. You still require that supervisory arm on the shoulder. What's up? Let's talk it through. Let's get it right.
Yeah, receiving that information.
Yeah.
Receiving that information from a manager that you respect, that you trust is going to be so crucial. And I really hope that we don't lose that.
Me too. So what are the legalities around this sort of AI for worker management?
So I would say that we did have a lawyer on the panel that could probably speak more brilliant to this. But I would say that right now, around AI more generally, we have the EU AI Act. So boots on the ground in the EU, that's great. In the UK, we have the white paper, which is, the AI's approach. We've got 5 guiding principles of our use, which is lovely. And I'm curious to see how we, appropriately operationalize those. I would say that AI assurance is the how, so we have this regulation that guides what responsible AI looks like. But in the ground, AI assurance mechanisms, risk management, which we're seeing out of NIST, AI bias audits, the responsible technology adoption unit, which sits within DCIT, is doing a lot of great work here. And I think I'm a big fan of breaking silos as well. So there's a lot of lessons we can actually learn by considering AI as an ESG issue or reflecting on GDPR applications of that, right? The Equality Act in 2010. Those things still exist and still apply to this emerging tech. So all too often we get a bit too excited. It's new. We need new regulation. And to a degree, yes, to support already existing, again, such as GDPR and equality. On the ethics side, which is more my domain, it's not, I don't have a concrete answer for you. It's not a black and white thing, right? Because ethics is so dependent on cultural social norms. And coming from a philosophy background, so I'll expose that. We've been asking these questions of what is right and wrong and immoral and moral and unjust and just of humans for such a long time. And now we get to ask those of systems. And a curious bit too is what was right 10 years ago is not necessarily right now. So having those monitoring mechanisms where we can maybe quarterly go back and review a system, I think will be also of great importance.
And from your experience, Andrew, when it comes to ethics, what's your thoughts on that?
I think for me, management of change is key. So
Yeah.
it's, have you got a management of change process? You should have one in the workplace. Like Tess has just said, yeah, it's new, it's shiny, isn't it going to be brilliant? Yes, it probably will, but you need to manage the change, and you need to consider everything from the ethnicity of your workforce, issues around physical fitness, somebody not feeling. It will never be a one-size-fits-all. It can't be. What it will be is a fantastic aid for efficiency, health and safety. We'll get better at health and safety using it, we just will.
Yeah.
And people will be safer. But we've got to manage it on the basis of how does it fit for all of our individuals that work with us. And also something that doesn't get thought about all the time in the change process is, if you bring in AI, what's your impact on the general public? And what's your impact on others that are doing things that will interact with your business? Because likely they don't know you've got AI. So what do you have up front? Policy, we call it what, but you need to be able to ensure that your communication is not just internal but external.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, how do you believe? Let's talk about sort of, practically implementing AI. You've got a lot of experience with this within EV cargo. How can it be effectively implemented in the workplace? And have you got any useful examples from your own experiences?
So I think the first thing is, do you understand why you want AI? Don't rush out because it's the new Buzz Lightyear or the new, whatever it might be, the
Nice
new
and
latest
new and
thing.
shiny, yeah.
That's not a reason to employ it. You should employ it because it's going to be great. But before you even start down the route, understand why you want it, what the outcomes are you expect from having it. Go and find somebody who's got it. Try and find someone who's already using AI effectively. Talk to the manufacturers of your vehicles about it, your equipment, but also try and find somebody that's using it within an operation that's heavily dependent on people. And how have they done it? What changes did they make to make sure it worked? And where are they in that journey? And then you can use that to sort of almost colour your process of implementing it. But the key thing is, why do you want it? What do you want it to do? And what will it look like when you bring it in? And then obviously the communication piece after that. But it's so important to know why you want it, because actually, if you don't, you could spend a lot of money and then the board will be looking at you saying, well, what was all that about?
Yeah, absolutely. Tess, one of your research interests is the impact of AI on disability rights. Could algorithmic management help to better support disabled workers?
I think that we may see an ability to specialize models again and consider health conditions or invisible disabilities or differently abled bodies if we're doing that in the right way. But a big motto of the disabled community is nothing for us without us. And what I mean by that is something we haven't really touched on is this like need for stakeholder engagement and using focus groups to understand what they're comfortable with and what their bodies are asking for these technologies. So not the question of, can we, but should we?
Mm-hmm.
And bringing disabled bodies into the dialogue really early on will be crucial. So there could be that benefit, but again, it comes back to appropriate uses and making sure that the community is feeding into those appropriate uses.
And Andrew, how do you feel that AI has contributed to the safety performance in your business? And could it contribute further in the future?
It will contribute further as long as we manage it and implement it properly. We're already seeing a high level of reduction in vehicle incidents because of the AI equipment in cameras, in the vehicles themselves. It's brilliant. So we're benefiting from that. The other side to it is that it's made reporting incidents a lot easier. The use of QR codes and that information feeding straight into a computer for someone to do something with. It's now much easier for our colleagues to raise a concern than it ever was. The thing I like as health and safety professional is it appears straight onto a computer screen. There's not hundreds of bits of paper coming in with information on. It's there on the screen. It can be allocated to someone who knows how to deal with the issue promptly, and also it can be assessed a lot quicker. So we are able to remove a hazard a lot quicker than if it was a paper-based conversation. It's, Tess could put something on a mobile phone with a QR code, and within seconds, you're looking at it and going, actually, we'll get that repaired tomorrow. And the other side that I really like about AI is it gives us a massive opportunity to feedback. So you can go back to Tess and say, oh, by the way, great near miss. This is what we've done. You'll see the engineer tomorrow and it gets repaired. So Tess is looking at her phone thinking, that's good. Whereas, dare I say it, in the old days, that would have taken a lot longer. We'd have got it done, but it had taken a lot longer and we might not necessarily have communicated it effectively. That's one of the big differences.
And how do you feel this kind of technology will affect? A big theme, actually, of this event has been the future of work, especially off the back of the report that IOSH published last week. So how do you feel that this kind of technology will affect the future of work? And what refinements do you think we need or might see in the future?
So I would point to two things.
Yeah.
Skills, and then this human AI interaction element, or a kind of synthetic relation in a way. So what we're seeing a lot of is this need for skills, but even zooming out is, what does it look like to be a responsible AI practitioner? And do you need to be technically trained, but also ethically trained? And then separate to that, do we actually have a supply chain and an education system that can support the kind of technical individuals that we're needing and seeing? And do we need to look at our education curriculum and consider stories and workshops around emerging technologies to encourage these kinds of careers? And then on the kind of human AI interaction side, and that being a key theme in the future of work, this trust element that we've already talked on, and this, again, talking communication is going to be so important. I think all too often we don't speak enough about AI narratives and the impact of how we come to know things through our news, through the conversations we're having. And I think we need to focus too on storytelling and the importance of stories, which is so innate in what it means to be human, and supporting healthy human AI interaction, and not reliance, not over dependence, but seeing it as just, another tool in our belt is going to be really important.
Brilliant. And how about you, Andrew?
I think I'd kind of echo that in a way, because it's so important that we get AI right, but equally we can't forget the human. That's the thing about it. It's got to be a dual approach, because if it's not, then the human will, not inevitably, but almost without saying, will reject it, because the what's in it for me is really important. We talked a little bit about it on stage, the communication side and how we explain what the AI is going to do, but equally important, what it won't do, and how the human can deal with that is massive. Because if you've not got that, then the distrust stays, and then the humans will, I won't use it.
They'll check
I'll ignore
out.
it.
Yeah. And so, as we've all mentioned here, you were part of the keynote panel on AI for worker management earlier today on the IOSH stage. So what do you think, or what do you hope that attendees will have taken away from that session, Tess?
I hope that attendees are walking away with action steps, that they don't feel paralyzed. I think that we did a pretty good job of looking at the positive sides of interacting and engaging with these systems and then implementing them. Two kind of key steps that we proposed at the end, and Andrew can jump in with more, was like, the UK is taking a sandbox approach right now in the regulation. And what I mean by that is like creating safe spaces within your organization that individuals feel they can experiment with suggested tools, that they can feedback on it, that you can talk about appropriate use cases before you start to scale. Because if you scale before doing that, harm might be caused because we're not taking those steps. And then to support this kind of communication, understanding, trust element, having curious conversations or kind of curious corners within your organization with kind of bridging the information gap between makers and users. So where technical individuals can explain these systems to non-technical individuals. And then those non-tech individuals, maybe communication teams, can now explain that to the public. And I think those would be
that would be a brilliant takeaway, because I think we from what we were talking about, the key things were make sure that you know why you want it, make sure you've got a policy, make sure you know what you're going to do with all the data. When you understand all that, tell your colleagues that you're going to introduce it and let them ask why, let them ask what it's going to do. Get into those conversations so that when AI turns up, it won't be a surprise to anybody and people won't be putting hands up and going, whoa, what does this do? So you've got to make the change as fluid as possible, but in the same vein, you're going to need to make sure you've got systems and processes to make it work for you.
And it's not AI happening to them, but it's AI happening for and with them.
Well, that's a great note to end it on, I think. Thank you both so much for joining me here today in the IOSH podcast booth.
It was really great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week for more Trailblazer Talks from the IOSH podcast.